So once we filled the barrels, we moved the barrels upstairs to the top floor of our distillery, and this is called a rick house. This is where we store our barrels during the entire length of the maturation process. Some of the things that we do that is unique here is with maturation, you want big swings in temperature. And we have done a couple different things utilizing some of the waste heat in their distillery to recapture that and help amplify those big temperature swings that we get during the differences in the seasons, but we try and amplify that with our production process that we have going on here. So we designed our HVAC system in the building to force all the air, the hot air that comes off of the still during distillation up into the rick house, and that heats this part of the building during the day, and then it'll cool off back down again at night. We also use our waste condensate that we redirect up into this room here. And so during the wintertime especially, it allows us to add heat and moisture that keeps the barrels tight and keeps them from leaking, especially in the winter months. And so during maturation, you want that liquid to be moving as much as possible. It's expanding and contraction inside the barrels. That's forcing that liquid through the char layer into the wood that is below it. And that's where you get those rich, sweet flavors that you associate with bourbon and with whiskey. So for maturation, we use exclusively Minnesota-grown oak to make all of our barrels. We get 3 different barrels that are made. They come from 3 different forests within the state of Minnesota. So we have staves that are coming from the southeast portion of Minnesota, the central portion, and the northwestern portion of Minnesota. But collectively, one of the things that makes Minnesota-grown oak unique is that it has a very tight grain pattern, and that comes from our slow growing season that we have. The result is that you're getting a lot more vanillin as a result from the slow growing season. And so that's something we intentionally target. We go in the barrel at a lower proof and we proof down inside the barrel. And that's all to try and extract as much of those natural sugars that we have from the Minnesota oak, and also the vanillin especially is what we're targeting. With our maturation process, we have done everything single grain up until this point, where we've mashed, fermented, distilled. We put that spirit into a barrel, all as its own individual grain property. Each one of these barrels we mark with chalk to signify if it's a corn whiskey, a rye whiskey, a wheat whiskey, or a malt whiskey. So after a certain period of time, we will then start doing sensory on the individual components, those individual grain barrels that we have. After we will then rebarrel those components into a blended bourbon, that bourbon will then age for at least another year, year plus as a finished blended bourbon inside the barrel here in our rick house, before we then eventually bottle that, and then that becomes our bourbon that is released to the market.